The neglected minimum wage. What is the first image that pops up into your head when you think of minimum wage? Is it this? Or maybe something like this? While jobs like this may seem easy and mindless, they account for the livelihoods of millions of Americans. As someone who has recently entered the workforce, the issue of the minimum wage has been brought to my attention. I feel that society has failed to spread awareness of the percentage of Americans whose hard work produces less than livable wages. Today, I will be informing you of the creation of the minimum wage, its enforcement, and its effects. So, why do we have a minimum wage? Patrick Kiger outlines the history behind it in his article Minimum Wage in America, a Timeline at History.com. During the Industrial Revolution, so many new inventions were created that employers were able to hire more people with less skills for lower wages. This led to the first ever strike in 1831 in Lyon, France, in which French workers at silk factories believed that the wages that they were earning were too low to support themselves. While the movement failed, it did spread to the United States when Samuel Gompers wrote A Livable Minimum Wage, where he requested not only that the U.S. enforce a minimum wage, but one that people could actually live on. Massachusetts then became the first state in 1912 to create a minimum wage. This was shut down by the Supreme Court, unfortunately, because they believed that it was a breach of the contract created between employers and employees. However, after the Great Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt believed that it was important to improve the working conditions for employees. So with his motivation, the Supreme Court, in what was known as the Big Switch, actually passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which deemed minimum wage constitutional. As for changes that have been made since then, in 1963, Kennedy passed the Equal Pay Act, which basically prevented employers from paying women lower wages than men. And in 1968, minimum wage stopped regulating and adjusting based on economic inflation. So now that we understand how the minimum wage was established, we can explore how it is enforced and the nuances of region and position. So what is the minimum wage? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in the article Characteristics of Minimum Wage, 542,000 workers earned the minimum wage of $7.25 in 2017, the minimum wage that was established in 2009. A record has been set in which the period from 2009 to now is the longest time since Congress has adjusted the federal minimum wage. Many states, however, have taken it into their own hands. So there are 29 states that have minimum wages higher than $7.25, 21 states that have not made a minimum wage higher, and 5 states that just don't have any law regarding minimum wage, so they follow whatever the federal law is, according to the Economic Policy Institution's Minimum Wage Tracker. Drew DeSilver provides an example of local wage laws in his article. When it comes to raising the minimum wage, most of the action is in the cities and states, not Congress, at Pew Research Center. There are 27 localities in California with their own minimum wages, and states like Oregon and New York establish minimum wages by region. Nationwide exceptions to the minimum wage laws include employers that make a revenue of less than $500,000 and jobs such as switchboard operators, babysitters, and private investigators do not have a minimum wage. So, while these variations of wage laws should benefit the workforce, they've come to elevate most classes except for the minimum wage workforce. So, who does it benefit? Large corporations benefit from low minimum wage because they're able to hire more people for lower wages, therefore having more labor and able to make a greater profit. According to the tight link between the minimum wage and wage inequality by Lawrence Mischel of the Economic Policy Institute, the minimum wage enables the 50-10 gap, or the gap between low-class and middle-class incomes. I am sure you can guess who the minimum wage hurts. Actually, 2/3 of the minimum wage workforce is women, which means women are disproportionately affected by the minimum wage, according to Minimum Wage by the National Women's Law Center. So when I say that they're affected or impacted by minimum wage, I mean that wage workers are being hurt by the inflating economy and the government's failure to adjust the minimum wage accordingly. According to David Cooper, Elise Gold and Ben Zipperer, who produced the article Low Wage Workers Are Suffering from a Decline in the Real Value of the Federal Minimum Wage in the Economic Policy Institute. They basically illustrate that the value of minimum wage has decreased when adjusted to the value of the American dollar. So what does this mean for the future? There is an ongoing movement called the Fight for 15, which began in 2012, which basically asked for a minimum wage of $15, according to the University Library's A Living Wage. Leslie Davis and Hannah Hardig claim that the Democratic Party is largely united in the movement, especially under former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. As stated in the article, 2/3 of Americans favor raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour at Pew Research Center. Therefore, the harmful effects of minimum wage are not going unnoticed in the United States. I have now explained to you how the minimum wage was created to protect low-class workers and how it is now being used to the advantage of employers in the middle class. Now that you understand how the minimum wage has neglected to adjust to the needs of millions of Americans, I hope we can ensure that these people are compensated for their countless hours of hard work. Thank you for listening.